Oh, hi there, hi there. Thank you so much, and great to be here. We've got a panel of real experts on this, nuanced and complex topic, and I'm going to let them each just introduce themselves and talk about what they're kind of focused on. I'll start with you, Hui.
Hi everyone, I'm Hui Wen Chan. I'm the Senior Director of ESG at Crusoe. Crusoe is a clean computing infrastructure provider and flare gas mining company. We deploy digital flare mitigation systems in the oil field that takes wasted energy from flared gas, a byproduct of oil production, and we turn that into electricity that powers modular data centers, that power Bitcoin mining and other advanced computing applications.
Hi, my name is Stephen Haft. I work at Consensys, where I have two roles. One is as on the partnership side, the other is as the climate lead. Consensys, as you may know, is a large builder of blockchain tools, mainly in and around the Ethereum system. I am also the co-founder, as it says, or it said, of the Ethereum Climate Platform. This is we'll talk about it in a minute, but this was pulled together in the wake of the recent merge to proof of stake as a way to assert some leadership in the sustainable finance space.
Great. And hi everybody, I'm Jesse Morris. I'm the CEO of a group called Energy Web Foundation. We build digital solutions to help some of the world's biggest energy companies decarbonize, and we happen to use some Web3 technologies to do that. We focus on solving two really specific sets of problems. Problem one is about the grid. We help electric utilities use things like batteries, electric vehicles, rooftop solar systems to balance the electric grid instead of big thermal power plants. And second, as we'll get into, we have a solution called Green Proofs that's about helping market participants create proofs that a product is green. What we'll talk about here today is about sustainably produced Bitcoin, but we also apply that same solution to things like hydrogen and renewable energy and even products like sustainable aviation fuel. So happy to be here.
Thanks all of you so much. And I just wanted to kind of start with a philosophical kind of question. ESG investing, it's, like it or dislike it, as it says in the intro here, or, a slightly fickle thing. But leaving that to one side for a moment, I wonder, is there a worry when it comes to Bitcoin for future generations? And I'm talking about the kind of Greta Thunberg generations and subsequent ones, that they just decide that, yeah, we get this crypto stuff, we like it, but this is essentially an asset, a hedge fund asset, a tradable asset that uses up a ton of electricity. We wouldn't support that. We will vote with our feet and not support that. Now, Bitcoin has a hallowed place in all our hearts, but I just wondered what you guys think. Is that a worry going forward, future generations? Hui, you could go again if you want.
I think one thing that we do know about ESG and investing is that there's a huge transfer of wealth that is underway. And a lot of that wealth is going to female investors and obviously to the next generation. And this group wants their money to be doing more than just generating more money for them. They want their money to be put to use, also solving environmental and social challenges. So I think that it's imperative for the crypto industry to think about kind of what that means and how they can align what they're doing with ESG related principles. I think Bitcoin mining and just like companies in all other sectors, there are different practices that you can choose to utilize. You can use different sources of energy, et cetera. So the better question is, what can Bitcoin miners and others in the industry do to ensure that they are aligned with ESG principles if this is a concern that they are worried about? Nice.
And that's just like crypto is tribal, and moving on to Stephen, you've got maybe a slightly different take. I'm now putting words in your mouth. Stephen, what do you think of that question? Future generations, will they vote with their feet, maybe turn away from Bitcoin, other cryptos? What do you think?
I'd say that the important thing to look at, we can all opine on future generations. I've got kids. I think a lot about what their world is going to be like. There are an awful large number of issues I think about as threats to my children that are much bigger threats than Bitcoin is. So I'd say looking on behalf as a parent to future generations on this issue, I'm not so worried about Bitcoin. I am, however, speaking in 2023, you might have a different answer in 2024, and I'd say in 2023, the brown nature of so much of blockchain tech built on proof of work is a significant issue. It's a significant issue in 2023, which is the year in which the regulatory environment, I think, is being defined for our industry for the next at least short period of time, but for maybe the next several years. We've just seen the Europeans come out with what they call MiCA or MiCA, the European blockchain regulatory scheme, and they came within an inch of banning all proof of work blockchains, which would have been a disaster. They didn't get there, but they came awfully close. So I'd say in 2023, big issue. Long run, it fits in a rather large bucket of issues that we have to be concerned about our kids having to deal with.
Good answer.
And look, the only thing I would add is that certainly thinking about future generations' opinion about crypto and ESG is interesting, and I'd echo both of your comments. I think it's also the business community, and in particular enterprise and institutional investment in Bitcoin and other commodities, digital commodities. And from our perspective, if Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not mostly produced with renewable electricity, I will say it right now, and I'll stand by this, institutional adoption is going to hit a very hard wall, because all of the boards of many of these different companies, if you're pitching a pension fund to buy Bitcoin, if you're pitching a pension fund to invest in a product that has a basket of cryptocurrencies underneath it, there's going to be an ESG person on that panel that says, excuse me, what's all this stuff about blockchain and energy consumption and carbon? So that's got to be fixed if this space is going to evolve, in my opinion.
But I think any fix, if you don't mind my saying, Ian and Jesse, I think is short term. It's short term because the brown nature of proof of work consensus is the way the question's being phrased today. But the minute you solve it through perhaps producing Bitcoin through renewable means and maybe buying some offsets to pretty up the situation, you're going to then deal with, I think, the political argument that will evolve. And the second argument will be, but why is all this energy going to Bitcoin mining and not to schools?
Yep.
And I think we need to be honest among ourselves that we might escape this immediate issue with some adoption of renewables around Bitcoin and proof of work consensus mechanisms. However, I think it's a short-term solution. There is, however, a bigger argument that somebody as smart as you, Jesse, and coming from the Rocky Mountain Institute as you do, could and should, I think, work on, which is the next level argument, which is, what is Bitcoin replacing? What is the energy consumption that blockchains replace in the real world, where Chase Manhattan Bank as a financing entity or any of aspect of the global finance system through, with not just even the private jets, just what it takes energy-wise to run a bank, to run a currency like the federal one, and so forth, and what are we replacing? Nobody's yet done that analysis of what Bitcoin or any of the proof of work blockchains have replaced, and I think that's where we're going to have to go in order to win this argument in the long run. In the short run, I agree with you, there may be some short run benefit to sourcing renewably, but I don't think it's a long-term solution.
Yeah, good. I mean, there is a lot of nuance. And the reason I asked that first question is because I just feel that there's a risk that the nuance will be lost. It will be lost on people, future generations. But with regards to that nuance, Jesse, I was going to bring up this, the different sides, the different takes on Bitcoin mining, right? And like we publish articles on CoinDesk that say things like, Bitcoin mining doesn't use coal. It's good for the grid. We can work with the grid. It adds flexibility to grids. And then you see just recently the New York Times came out with this very long article which said exactly the opposite. They said, well, it uses coal, and also it's not good for the grid. People can end up paying money just to have Bitcoin mining companies shut down. Jesse, I don't know if you want to start maybe. What's your take on this? The New York Times article, you must have read it.
No, I'm not a both sides kind of person, but the shorter answer is both sides in terms of folks making some arguments in response to that New York Times piece from the Bitcoin community. And then from the other side, from the New York Times, if you were to put it on that spectrum, there is, in my opinion, a middle ground. There were some disingenuous comments in the New York Times piece about the nature of Bitcoin mining and how it works and its environmental footprint. And on the other side, I would really encourage those in the Bitcoin community to not maybe pull some of the stunts that were pulled in response to that, like walking around a data center with a sensor that shows, oh look, there's 0 carbon emissions in our facility. That's just not, I get the point, but that's not going to win any points. From my perspective, at EnergyWeb anyway, there is a middle ground. We are working with, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but very briefly, we are working with some Bitcoin miners that are using renewable energy to power their mining operations to help them prove to regulators and to investors that their Bitcoin is being produced with renewable electricity. And so we're trying to cut through both of those sides and just show what's real. But before I stop, Stephen made a really good point. Many of the ESG attacks on Bitcoin are, in my opinion, sheathed in this ESG armor, but it's really a moral or ethical thing. It's a question about, well, electricity is being spent on Bitcoin mining, and many regulators and policymakers have deep questions about that. And right now it's about ESG. So they say, oh, why are we using coal-powered electricity to make Bitcoin? I think the real thing that's underneath that is there's a moral and ethical judgment about Bitcoin electricity consumption, and it's protected with this ESG sheath. I don't know if you agree.
Oh, I completely agree. And Ian, we're deferring to the fact that you asked the question about Bitcoin, but I do think in this regard, we should talk about all proof of work. Because there's a lot of enterprise-based proof of work out there still operating. It's not just about Bitcoin, it really is about what is blockchain replacing. And I don't think we have made an effective case to the financial markets or the regulators as to how much of the economy we potentially do better than the other ways of doing things, and what does that save in terms of energy costs. In the sustainability space, let's face it, if you're not doing digital MRV, I'll assume that anybody who stayed for this panel knows what I'm talking about, but the verification of climate mitigation, if you're not doing it digitally, you're hiring a team of executives who spend 8 months and get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to travel around and write reports about how whatever this factory or infrastructure player is emitting in their production cycle, and that has a carbon footprint. That carbon footprint compared to the 2 minutes it takes to just simply read a digital solution is vast. And we haven't made the case that the digitalization to begin with and the digitalization on Web3 is saving a tremendous amount to be determined, because nobody's actually run those numbers yet, but I think they'd be rather favorable.
Yeah, excellent stuff, excellent stuff.
I'll just add that, to the point about Bitcoin being energy intensive, I don't think we can, deny that. Bitcoin and other advanced computing applications are definitely energy intensive. And the approach that Crusoe has taken, which is different from a lot of other miners, is we know that it's energy intensive, but we also know that there's a lot of inefficiencies in the energy system today that causes a lot of energy to be wasted. So we, at Crusoe, utilize wasted flared gas The World Bank reported that last year, nearly 100 billion cubic meters of natural gas was just wastefully burned with no beneficial value, enough to generate 1,800 terawatts of electricity. If we think about what that means, it could power the Bitcoin mining network multiple times over. So we deploy our digital flare mitigation systems directly into the oil field where the gas is being wasted and stranded and flared, so that we can reduce flaring, reduce methane emissions, produce electricity, not tap into the grid, which helps us avoid some of the kind of critiques of Bitcoin mining that we hear today, and ultimately prove that when done the right way, Bitcoin mining can support the energy transition and can help improve the environment by reducing emissions.
So I was, when I first heard about flare gas, which, for anyone that doesn't know, it's just burn and you can use it to power Bitcoin mining, it sounded like a dream come sort of true, and that was a couple of years ago. I mean, Bitcoin mines and mining are portable. They move them across China in the wet season and stuff like that. So it seems like there's a huge opportunity. But is there an issue with scaling this? I mean, how much of this actually goes on? If you, I don't know if you got the data on how much Bitcoin is mined with flare gas, and is it scaling better now than it was? Is my kind of question.
Crusoe is definitely growing quickly, so we're trying to scale. But obviously, mining with flare gas is a lot more complex and logistically challenging, and much more capital intensive than just plugging miners into an outlet that's connected to the grid. We have to negotiate agreements with oil and gas companies, and structuring those agreements take time. It requires, big pieces of equipment, generators, turbines, lots of electrical components, the modular data centers themselves, which are, complex, logistically complex to move, and then they also need to be networked. So I'm not denying that doing mining using flare gas is a lot more challenging than connecting to the grid, but there's a lot of flared gas being wasted today. And if you can make it work, one, it really reduces the cost of Crusoe's energy. And as we know, energy cost is a huge component of Bitcoin mining. So if you can keep those costs low, it's only beneficial. And two, we really believe in the environmental value of what we're doing. And so even though it is much more challenging, we believe that this is the right approach. Nice,
excellent. And Jesse, I was going to ask you about, back in the day, I used to cover enterprise blockchain. I was an expert on it at one stage. Not so popular now, but when you wanted to track something, you'd stick it on a blockchain, and carbon credits and things like that were use cases that were touted. But from talking to you, I think you've become rather more skeptical, or you're taking a different approach. Do you want to talk about where you're at with that stuff, tracking stuff on blockchain? You don't use blockchains to do that anymore, right?
No, and thank you for the question, and I know we're covering a lot of ground here. But to step from Bitcoin mining for a second and step back. So maybe one way to answer this is, when we started at Energy Web back in 2017, we had a list of hundreds of different ways that we thought you could use blockchain technology to basically solve problems in the energy sector. And on that list, we also profiled something like 150 startups. Again, this was 2017, not too many years ago. There were 150 startups claiming to use blockchain to transform energy systems. And the hot topic at that time was something called peer-to-peer energy trading. How many of those companies are left? Yes, 150, right? There are 3 left, right? And of those 3, it's not even clear if any of them are using blockchain technology anymore. So what I see happening now is a similar wave, and it's about the tokenization of existing data. So what we as the foundation of Energy Web Foundation have completely stepped back from is, if there's a use case where, for example, you might be taking an existing registry or a database about things like carbon credits or renewable energy certificates or whatever, and then you just blockchain it, right? And you just tokenize those things. In our experience, that creates zero value for enterprise. So we basically have stopped doing that. But what I'm tracking and I am a bit skeptical about is it's a resurgence of some other organizations and companies that are doing some of that, right? They're starting to basically take existing data and repositories and just put it on a blockchain and then build a whole business around that. And I've yet to be convinced that that's going to be something that creates a lot of value for some of these enterprises. And so we're watching that pretty carefully with a skeptical eye.
I mean, the offsetting has come on, like we've got this sustainable Bitcoin protocol, which is like had a lot of press. I think these guys are really serious. You know about them. You've been working with them, Hui, haven't you?
Yeah, they're the audience. Yeah.
No. But I mean, what's the difference? What are they doing differently from those guys before? Anyone grab it? Go.
I can start since we're partnering with them. The Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol is trying to incentivize the use of renewable energy and waste gas by miners by creating essentially an asset that can be sold and traded among investors that want to be able to prove that the Bitcoins in their portfolio are sustainable. So I think it's not just about like putting something on the blockchain. It's very much about creating something that adds value to investors and miners in the marketplace. So it is very different.
And on our side, because this might be useful to say, like, how can you use Web3 stuff to create value that's not just blockchaining something? So like on our side, we have an initiative called Green Proofs for Bitcoin, and we work with Bitcoin miners, and we've created a accreditation process that they apply to. We use decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials in blockchain to manage the data around that process. So we protect everybody's privacy, we issue verifiable credentials, but we're not like blockchaining a bunch of data, right? But we're using that to help bring more transparency to these solutions.
And Stephen, I wanted to talk about the incredibly interesting work you're doing with Consensys, with Ethereum, because you're going back in time and looking at the historic footprint of Ethereum. Do you want to talk about the climate work that Consensys is doing?
Sure, no, I'm happy to. I have the privilege of working at Consensys, and as some of you may know, Consensys, the founder of Consensys, Joe Lubin, was also a co-founder on the original Ethereum team. And interestingly, the so-called Paris Accords for Climate, all those of you who would be at this panel know what I'm talking about, was created in 2015, as was Ethereum. And interestingly, there was a very strong alignment, as there is when you think about, for example, I'm going to go a little abstract here, in the American Revolution and the French Revolution, you had British and French philosophers like Rousseau and Locke, whose ideas appear in both these events that took place in different parts of the world, relatively near to each other, but in the same period of time. In much the same way, in 2015, there are ideas that live in the Paris Accords that also live in the creation of Ethereum. The Paris Accords, when you actually read them, talks extensively about the importance of transparency. People want to know, are you fixing my planet? They talk extensively about the end of what they call double counting, but which is essentially financial duplicity. They talk about the importance of applying and spreading new technologies. They talk about the vital need to take decision-making around climate-related policies and take them from the few out to the many. These are themes that exist in the creation of Ethereum and the creation of the climate change movement as we know it today, which in a way, at least by the definition of climate change, actually started with the Paris Accords. So there was once a true alignment, interestingly, between the Ethereum blockchain and the Paris Accords. Now, obviously, the proof of work years separated us from that alignment for now a 7-year period. And what happened was that Consensys, because we have the privilege of a relationship through Infura and MetaMask and the company in general, and Joe's sort of leadership in this space, to talk to a lot of the Ethereum community. Suddenly, when the merge came around, September of 2022, and we were going to go overnight from being, in too many ways, a brown tech to a squeaky clean green tech literally in a matter of minutes, what to do with that. And I started talking to the devs around the world who were working on the so-called merge. What do you want to do? And the funny thing is, being a sort of engineering-led operation, the engineering answer was, I usually use different wording about this, but they basically said, what the are you talking about? We've just dropped 99% of your carbon footprint. What else do you want? And our answer was, yes, but now we have the opportunity to lead. And so what I can report, and I have to give credit where it's due to watching with great admiration what Jesse did in the formation of the Crypto Climate Accords. We sought to pull together a true consortium of leading companies, in not just the Ethereum, but even outside the Ethereum ecosystem, together to build a best of Web3 climate finance platform that is now being constructed. And the easiest analogy to use, and one I have used in describing how it's being put together, is I lived in Germany for a few months last year, and so I was thinking in sort of German metaphors that a group of Volkswagen engineers got together with a group of Porsche engineers and designed the Audi as a mix of the best of Volkswagen tech with the best of Porsche tech. In much the same way, we're working with Aave, Filecoin, Celo, Gitcoin, Near, Polygon, and 20 other companies to pull together. At the moment, we're in the midst of building that actual straw man of what a climate finance platform would look like that has tech drawn from all these partners in a single platform to address the funding of climate efforts, to address the 7 years of proof of work, I'll use the term carbon debt, and beyond, to take Ethereum and the sort of rubric of the carbon debt that Ethereum has and use it as the driver to assemble money to more than redress what we've done and benefit the planet beyond what we took from it.
I mean, I love how you got Rousseau into that. I don't know how you did it, but it was very impressive. I mean, I was quite surprised to hear that Ethereum's carbon debt is equal to Switzerland's energy use for 1 year. I thought it might have been more, actually.
Yeah. You know, I did a panel with Michael Casey. We talked about this about a year or so ago. Yes, there are various estimates. There is the famous Digiconomist estimate. There is Kyle McDonald has a different estimate. There's the Crypto Carbon Rating Institute, which is somewhere in the middle. We believed when we made a decision as a group that Cambridge University's Bitcoin Energy Index was the most reliable read in the space. There's even controversy around them, but we had several choices. We picked them, and they've just come back this morning with an estimate of this 58 terawatt hours of power, which is the collective carbon debt of 7 years of Ethereum, which will translate, if one uses the energy mix of Switzerland and globalizes it, which isn't what we're going to do. We're going to have a more accurate read, which includes the Chinese energy mix and other things that are relevant. But I think we're going to end up at about 30 million metric tons would be my guess over the 7 years.
That's good work. And we're really short on time, I've just noticed. But last thing, I want to go around each of you. Maybe give your sort of 5-year prediction of where we're going to be with sustainability, ESG, and crypto, not just Bitcoin. If you want to start here.
I definitely think, given all these, new initiatives that Energy Web, Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol, and others are creating to incentivize, the use of more renewable and sustainable energy resources, that hopefully more miners are going to incorporate it into their use. I think it's really important. because it is energy intensive. You know, like Ethereum, 58, terawatt hours. Bitcoin is gonna be like multiples of that. And if there's anything that we can do to, address that critique, all the better.
I'd say in answer to that, just look around the room, and if you listen to the range of panels over these 3 days, and a good number of us were at this event a year ago, 2 and 3 years ago when it was in New York. Everybody was a radical individualist around their own company. Everybody was wearing the colors and the t-shirts, and it's our t-shirt against your t-shirt and our company against your t-shirt against your company. I think what you're going to hear at this conference over the coming days is a lot about interoperability. I think you're going to hear a lot about cross-chain. And the best thing I can say about what we're attempting to do is we're actually attempting to build a single platform with 20 different, often competing blockchain companies collaborating, and that's what I think this year is going to represent for us.
5 years from now, just 2 things. One, Bitcoin mining in Canada, North America, and Europe should be 100% renewable and verified to be so. No question, we can do that. We have the tech to do it right now. Second, we need to prove that there are enterprises in the world, like the ecosystem you just described that you all have assembled, that are actually using Web3 technology to solve real business problems. We have to prove that by 2025 or we should all go home.
Thanks all of you so much. Fantastic insights. What a great panel.
Thank you, Ian.